Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Um, Happy Wednesday to you. We're going to get started here pretty quickly. Lots to do today, as usual. Try to respect your time. So I've got everyone's video on. Stanley and Victoria, if you guys could for a moment, thank you. Let's keep that video on. All right, first thing we're going to start with today is we've got our open notes quiz on chapter 13. So I'd ask you guys to take notes on chapter 13. Um, and getting messages here. Sorry about that. All right, so chapter 13, the quiz looks like this. It's on the bottom of the, no, it's not. It's close to the bottom of chapters 10 to 13. It says chapter 13 notes quiz. There are 12 questions. You guys definitely have the advantage of having me lectured over yesterday, so it should be significantly easier than it normally will be. Either way, get started on that now. I don't have a time limit on it, but I definitely wish that I did. And then it is 12:16 right now. I would like everybody to, what I want you to do is when you are actually finished with your quiz, okay, you can go off of your video and then I'll know that you're done, okay? And once everyone has their video off, then I'm going to tell everyone to get back on because I've got notes we got to do and some things we got to talk about. So before you guys start this quiz, does anybody have a question other than Jackson? I'll help you out separately. Anybody else? No? Okay, get started, please. Keep your video on. And when you're done, I'll know you're done by you turning your video off. Okay, chapter 13 notes quiz. Looks like this, 12 points. Good luck. Get started, please. Just so everyone is clear, you can use the notes that you took. I don't want anybody to take this blindly. Use the notes you took from the reading, please. All right, it appears that we're getting narrowed down here to the where everyone's almost done. Actually, it looks like everyone is done. Okay, if you guys could do me a favor, turn back on your screens. If you're out there, come back from the bathroom, whatever you're doing. Thank you. And we will get moving here. All right, so based on what I had talked to you about yesterday, I need to go over one thing with you. And I had a typo on the Word document that I showed you. So I'm going to go ahead and show that to you right now. Just want to make sure that you guys see, and I highlighted where I had a typo. Okay. I told you on Monday, I think it said 229. It should have said 239. You see in the highlighted yellow here, this was where the mistake was. Okay. Again, I apologize for that. Just want to make sure I changed it period 9 so they know. But all of you that wrote down 227, 229, and we're really excited about it, I apologize. But it'd be a disservice to you if you didn't get to read about the Byzantine Empire and Kiev and Rus. So I need to make sure. All right, so there's a change for you there. And then as long as everyone has that, I've left it up there a while, I think we should be good. So we're going to get moving here. And this is kind of it's not what we would typically do today. I have what we would typically do on Canvas. If we get a chance to get there, great. If we probably won't, because I've got quite a bit to explain about Japan and Korea and Vietnam. All right, so kind of the drive-by edition of this. This is where you guys can take some notes. This is also located on your Canvas page, so you can review it that way, and you can write down kind of the key highlights. But we used to spend, obviously, a whole week on this. Now I'm just going to spend 15, 20 minutes. So there were 3 civilizations in areas that were highly influenced by China during this golden age, okay, of the Tang and the Song, and that's Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. Right? Were there other areas that were highly Sinified? Yes, but most of those places would get swallowed into these larger areas, and so that's why we're going to talk about them today. Just so you know, there is bias in that because we could talk about different areas. So the history of Japan, they have their own unique creation history and their own unique set of beliefs known as Shintoism, but we're not going to get too much into that and their creation story. We're going to really look at the period of time called the Yamato period. Yamato, sorry. Basically, what they started doing was borrowing from China, and it really occurred when China reunified underneath the Tang, or the Sui and the Tang dynasty, and Japan adopted the following characteristics of China. First off, this idea of Confucianism, and that respect for family and filial piety. If I had more time, I'd ask you guys to go over the 5 key relationships, but the basically ruler to subject kind of sums it all up in male to female. Okay. A writing system. So the Japanese took on the Chinese kanji, or system of using characters for words, and then they would make their own later on, but at first they developed their character system based off of Chinese characters. Then they adopted Zen Buddhism, the same thatched roof, curved ends type of dwellings, that pagoda style. that was famous under the Tang in the song. And then in a system of reforms known as the Taika reforms, you don't need to know that name. They tried to copy and even bring in civil service exams and make their government much like that of the Chinese. Okay. And they tried to create a bureaucracy. They exalted a position to the emperor to try to copy the Tang. Yeah. All right. So after the Tang fell, which was 9th century, they started to weaken. This was when the Japanese started to move away from copying the Chinese. And their last imperial mission was in 838, if you remember right. It was, again, mid 8th century or mid 9th century when the Chinese started to really falter, and you had that huge Neo-Confucianism push. And so the Japanese started to kind of go their own way, and they developed a different writing system that was syllabic, which matched their their actual spoken language, and they call that kana. Kana is the kind of the shorter version of that, but they still use. There's still like multiple alphabets. If some of you who probably know anime or know it better than me, but or take Japanese. And then it's this time where you start to see the imperial court life of the Japanese and like the position of the emperor really take shape. And the ideas of Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Shintoism all mixed together. An example of this is this Tale of Genji, which is considered to be one of the world's first novels. It was about the court life, and we're not going to read this letter. It's just about court intrigue and love and all these entangling alliances this woman has with different affairs and people in the court. Okay. But this is kind of unique Japanese culture then. During what's known as the Heian period, the government was led by an emperor, but aristocratic and real powerful landowning families started to exert their influence over the emperor. And so those families that owned a lot of the land on the main islands of Japan, they used their tax base they got to then live at the court. And basically it was one clan known as the Fujiwara clan that they married their daughters off to become empresses, and they ruled as regents, which regents are basically when an emperor or empress is too young to rule, then they have somebody rule in their place. And so it was this family that dominated, and it was really, you had a lot of Buddhist temples built prior to, let's say, 1100 CE. Then you had the rise of the emperor and these families that were very noble and wanted to act like they were very rich and high class. And then the rest of the people were largely unaffected in other areas outside of the capital and outside of where the emperor lived. Okay. This would lead to really 3 large families who had their own peasant armies and who wanted to control the emperor to go to war. It was the Minamoto, the Fujiwara, and the Taira. And in what's known as a series of wars called the Genpei Wars, the vocab don't worry so much about it, but the fact that there are these wars between aristocratic families and who ends up winning is the Minamoto. Okay. And so around the end of the 12th century, that's late 1100s, Japan's going to be broken up into a patchwork of what we call feudal states. Okay. These feudal states then would be governed over by the strongest military leader and the person who could control the most peasants and then thus raise the largest armies. And that was the position of the shogun. Okay. And then I have on there more powerful than the bushi. I don't want to confuse you too much, but the bushi were like smaller landowners, and they would raise armies to support the shogun when the shogun needed help. Okay, when he needed to raise an army to, let's say, defeat someone who was rebelling or somebody who wasn't paying their taxes. The imperial court. So the emperor and the people that followed the emperor and the emperor's bodyguards and the monks that followed the emperor basically went off into the hills and went into hiding. And the real power lay within what we call a Bakufu government. And it's kind of confusing, but the Bakufu is the word for tent. And if you can picture like an actual tent, like you might go have a picnic under a tent, or, you know, you might see like a family in a park set up a tent and they have a food underneath it. Well, a tent, it wasn't meant to be a permanent government, but because they couldn't really unify and there was so much regional loyalty in Japan, this tent government lasts arguably until like 1868. It's kind of crazy. Okay. That's a long time. All right. This is usually where I lose people. So try to rein you back in with this nice little chart. What you end up with here is a feudal structure. And we haven't talked about feudalism. I've never taught this class in this order. I always talk about, we usually get a good basis for European feudalism before we talk about Japanese feudalism. But feudalism is a system based off of allegiances, and for those allegiances, you typically get something in return. Okay, so what do I have on here? Political, economic, social system based on, I can't read my thing, someone's in the way. Loyalty, land, and military service. So whoever is the lord typically gives away some type of piece of their property, something that they control, and then the vassal is somebody who receives the gift and then in return has to do some type of service. Okay, so on this diagram you can see for here, you have the shogun, who's the military leader and technically, the most exalted position. Even though the emperor was supposed to be worshipped like a god, the emperor was off in the hills, and so the military shogun leader led. The daimyo would replace the bushi as the landowners. These are called daimyo, and there were over 300 daimyo. Okay, but they were realistically just large landowners that controlled peasants. Now, those large landowners needed protection, just like European lords needed protection, and so they would, for protection, they would train and pay samurai to defend them and to train their whole life to be samurai. In the event that they needed protection, they had samurai. So there were inner wars between daimyo and daimyo in regional wars, but then the shogun could at any point call up the daimyo, and they would have to bring their samurai with them as well. Yeah, this is how feudalism works. And then the samurai protected the peasants technically and represented the daimyo, and in return, they would get food and they wouldn't have to farm the land. Okay, and so you see shogun technically, in theory, is giving land to the daimyo is giving land, okay, or status to the samurai, and the samurai are protecting. Okay, Again, this wasn't meant to be permanent, but it ended up lasting for quite a long time. All right. The coda of the samurai, known as Bushido. Some of you may have seen this before, and you can see the elaborate design of the samurai uniform. Came out of this whole idea of frugality, loyalty, practice in martial arts, and then the idea of seppuku, or if you get captured, you don't kill someone, you capture them, and then you allow them to commit ritualistic suicide. Okay, harikari, some of you have heard of that before, where you take a sword, you split your belly open, and then someone chops your head off before so you don't feel it for that long. This was influenced by the whole value of Confucianism and Zen Buddhism. Okay, here's, I don't know, this is the honorable way of seppuku, and Bushido is the code. I used to show a video. It's pretty gross and graphic. If you go on YouTube and you want to look it up on your own, if you're into that kind of thing, look it up. Samurai, though, and one of the pieces of technology that the samurai were most well known for was their swords and their steel and the strength of the steel. The outfit that they wore, you can see that they also had cavalry horses here. Their outfit was pretty intense. Okay, so you got like cotton underwear, then a kimono, then you got pantaloons, and then you put on iron shin guards, and then you have exquisite brocades, so some kind of wherever you were from, you had your own design. And here's an idea of a samurai versus a knight. So you guys have heard of chainmail before and knight's armor. Typically, we'll have a discussion on which one looks more intimidating. I'm probably going to go with on the right, samurai, but that's your call. And then over time, these daimyo start to build up their estates because they're collecting taxes from the poor and the peasants. And so their status becomes more and more elevated, and the daimyo the daimyo build protection. And so you end up seeing castles built in Japan that are somewhat similar to European castles, okay, with moats around them, multi-storied. You can see the design architecture. That's a copy of the Tang and the Song. And Japan is broken up into these 300 regional states until Hideyoshi Toyotomi, the Tokugawa Ieyasu, they get guns. Until the samurai get guns and try to unify it again, which is kind of unified. It's not really actually a one nation until 1868. And it's going to fend off imperialism until then. All right, that's all I got on Japan, all I have time for. Some of you maybe have seen the Osaka Castle. This is one of the best examples of what would be like equivalent to a castle in medieval Europe. Okay, and controlled by the daimyo. All right, we're gonna take a little bit at Korea and the Korean Peninsula. And here you can see the Pechki, the Koguro, and the Silla. And there was basically these three kingdoms were trying to rival each other for power. The Koguro are going to team up with the Chinese to eventually win. And a little bit about Korea. They're descendants of Siberia and Manchuria. So Manchuria is technically Chinese. Siberia, is Russian in today's terms, and they settled there in the 4th BCE. The Han had already conquered Korea, and they willingly accepted Chinese influence. Okay, so that's called Sinification, if you remember right. One of the big ones was Buddhism and Confucianism. And then on top of that, the writing system, the laws of the Han universities, the same type of bureaucracy that the Han had, the Koreans adopted. Okay. They would also be broken up into splinter states. And, oh, there we go. They'd be broken up into these splinter states or smaller kingdoms, and then the Tang would come in and basically pay the Koguro to unify Korea in 668 CE. And they pay tribute, they pay taxes, they send people to the Chinese court during the Tang and the Song dynasties, and they copy Chinese architecture, and printmaking, and it started in Korea, to be honest, the woodblock printing, and then went to China. And basically then, once the Tang fell, they were independent. The Mongols would take them over in the 13th century. But then after the Mongols left, they would rule themselves until 1910 when the Japanese would take them over. So the Korean Peninsula was independent from the 1300s all the way until 1910, the 20th century. All right. Let's look at Nam Viet. You guys see the Han Dynasty? And then you're going to see Nam Viet here. So, or Vietnam. Okay. Sorry for the annoying sound. 2nd century BCE. So between 100 and 200, they're conquered by the Han. They already had their own strong cultural heritage, but when the Han and then subsequently the Tang would come back in as well, because both are very imperialistic, came the upper classes. Some of them tried to take on Chinese culture. They tried to create civil service exams. They tried to create a similar education system, based off the civil service exams, Confucianism. It didn't totally work. Buddhism spread there over time, but between Japan, Korea, and Nam Viet, Vietnam was one of the three that kept its own independence and resisted Chinese culture. And the lower classes really weren't affected much by the Chinese at all. They had to pay taxes during the Tang, but their resistance started pretty early on, and they kind of, again, they said that they were following the Chinese and did what they asked, but they really kept their own type of culture. You guys have seen maybe the blackening of the teeth before, different dress. They married. The Chinese thought that the Vietnam Viet were barbaric, but the Vietnamese thought that they were just bullies and imperialistic. So after the fall of the Tang, around 900 or so, Vietnam would remain independent until the French would take them over in imperialism in the 1800s. Until the French lose in Britain, or in India to the English, and then they move over. All right, guys. That is it. I know the bell's going to ring in a minute. So make sure you made those changes to your notes. I was quick. That's on Canvas if you want to look at it. Just be prepared to go over this whole chapter, or chapter 13 plus what we talked about today on AP themes. Tomorrow you're going to be doing some group work. And I'll give you your debate prep on Friday. And if I were you, I'd start reading, taking notes over what's due next Monday. Okay, because that's a lot of reading. Okay, but no official homework. See you guys. Thank you for your attendance and your I hope you were paying attention. I can't really tell. I mean, I can kind of. So, all right. See you guys.
Do you want us to make a College Board account? You did want us to do that, right?
I mean, I do. But you're supposed to get a letter. I think Mr. Hodgson said he's sending it out either today or tomorrow. So you should be getting an email with what to do. Okay.
Okay.
If that doesn't come, let's say by like Monday, then I'll take care of it with you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to get through stuff as we can. All right, see ya.
Um, my Chinese philosophy quotes are marked as missing.
Did you
I'm just
turn them?
wondering if they migrate.
Did you turn them in?
Yeah, my partner did.
Oh, he didn't have your name on it.
Oh,
I won't count that against you. Okay.
okay.
I'll go ahead and
Thank you.
take care of that right now. Thanks for asking. Have a
You're
good day.
welcome. You too.